time we face it.
All right. Well, as I remember.
At Avenger headquarters.
Because united, the Avengers are strong.
Welcome to the Marvel D&T Evolution podcast with myself, Andy Stead.
And I'm Jarian Gibson.
And I'm Alex Strout.
And we're welcoming back Martin Flanagan, our Marvel professor. How you doing, mine?
Hi guys, I'm fine, thanks. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me back.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. No, it's great to have you back. We had great feedback from the last episode that you was on, and specifically, we had people asking to hear more of you. Hence, why you're here.
Great. I'm really pleased they liked it, and I hope I don't put people off this time.
Andy, I can't hear you.
I stepped on my remote.
Oh, okay.
when did I cut out?
Just as soon as I stop talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can edit it out. So
No, don't edit it out. Leave it in there. It shows we're human. So just a really quick recap on last week's episode. We had Monty Harry on, and we spoke about Secret Invasion. We delved into the comic story a little bit. We spoke about the story arc in there. We spoke about some of the characters. We spoke about how it was going to link, or how we thought it was going to link up with the Disney Plus show later this year. The other influences like the cartoons, Earth Mightiest Heroes, Avengers Assemble, and just how we thought that the Secret Invasion storyline might link up in the MCU. And it was a good episode. It was a really good chat. It was nice to chat about one subject that we don't really know much about, but we've got a whole lot of history about, and just really speculate. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go back last week's episode and catch up on that one. So we're going to hit off today's podcast with a bit of a news recap. We've had a few weeks where we've not gone through much news. We're going to get to talking to Martin in a little while, and we've got a couple of bits we're going to probe him for. But feel free to jump in, Martin, in this news section if there's anything that really jumps out at you and you want to mention. But other than that, Jarian, it's over to you for some news.
yeah, it seems like Wakanda Forever has been very newsworthy this week. A lot of stuff coming out. The first thing coming out is Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri, is back on set, and Wakanda Forever is starting to film again. So that's good news there. Other piece of news there about casting is that Winston Duke, who plays M'Baku, has gotten a hefty raise, has been reported, and he's gotten an expanded role in Wakanda Forever. So interesting to see where that story goes in that sequel. Another rumor has started as well about the series is that Doctor Doom is going to kind of be the antagonist that kind of gets Atlantis and Wakanda going at each other behind the scenes. Now, I don't know how big of a role he'll have, but that rumor is starting out there, and maybe he'll be like an end credit scene. They'll finally show him. But Lake Bell has been shown on set in an outfit in set photos that look like Lucia von Bardis, who is like the prime minister of Latvia, and it reports to Doom and works with Doom and that kind of stuff. So maybe she's kind of the one that we see in the film, and maybe we see Doom get introduced in an end credit scene, kind of like Thanos, if I'll do it myself type of thing. The last bit of news about Wakanda Forever is that just like how Civil War was a setup film for Black Panther and then going into the Black Panther movie, Wakanda Forever will be the setup film for Namor, and that will lead into a spin of Namor appearances. And Rumored One is his own film where we're going to explore Atlantis, similar to Black Panther, where we explore Wakanda. So that's all the Black Panther news out there.
Nice. Just there on Namor. It's funny. I was never really not very knowledgeable about him until he started to seem like he was going to appear in the MCU, and I didn't go looking for this information, but it must be one of those things like the sort of law of attraction type thing. He's then in my mind, and then I'm seeing him everywhere. I'm reading comments. I'm like, I didn't even realize he was in this, and he was just showing up everywhere. And so I guess that's where they're going with it.
Yeah, and then Alex had that post, I believe, in the group about his foot wings.
Yeah.
You know, do we include those? Go ahead, Alex.
I was just gonna say, it just seems like kind of not modern for the MCU, with how they've modernized a lot of characters and stuff like that. But I mean, he is a mutant, so like he can fly, so that's kind of like also the little thing. So like, do you actually give him those or not? But
Does he fly via his foot wings? They don't seem like they've got enough.
Yeah,
it's like one of those things where I think it's just kind of like it's not really like it's like more of like one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, he flies, but that really makes no sense how that would make him fly. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's like, oh yeah, he's got wings too.
So he can fly because he's got wings. They might only be
Yeah.
3 centimeters long, but that's why he can fly. Right? Okay, I gotcha. Go on, Jarian, carry on.
But good to see Wakanda Forever is back filming, and it's supposed to be out later this year. It's probably going to be a tight timeline, but so is No Way Home, so I'm sure they can pull it off. But glad to see everything's worked out with Letitia Wright. She's back on set after her injuries, and they're able to get her back in the country to continue filming in Georgia. So that's all about Wakanda Forever.
Excellent.
The next bit of news is going to be the Disney Plus shows. So we did get a teaser for Moon Knight that showed a little bit more. We actually saw Ethan Hawke's character. We don't know who he's playing yet. Some think it's Sun God, but we'll see. But the trailer's coming tonight. So during the wild card playoff game of Kansas City in Pittsburgh, they're going to show a new trailer for it and potentially give us a release date. Right now, the rumored release date is March 30th for Moon Knight, with She-Hulk to come right after, Miss Marvel to come later this summer. And in the lineup that Disney or Marvel Japan website has is that it also shows us that I Am Groot is coming this year, Secret Invasion is coming later this year, and What If Season 2. So it looks like we're going to have 6 Disney Plus content this year, shows of content this year on Disney Plus. Now also too is that Moon Knight did go through some reshoots. So it looks like those are done, those are wrapped up. But also too that She-Hulk went through some reshoots as well, and the rumors are that it's to fix some continuity and some pacing of the show. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. And Miss Marvel went through reshoots as well. And speaking of reshoots, one more thing is that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness reshoots have wrapped as well. So it seems like Marvel has been very busy with these projects and getting some things fixed up and so forth.
Why Martin might be able to shed a bit more light on this with a little bit more understanding of the film industry from his background, but why do you think there's been so many reshoots this time around? I mean, I know there's a lot of shows, so obviously more shows will mean more reshoots just because of, law of averages, but there seems to be like everything's had reshoots, like absolutely everything. And that, I'm pretty sure that's normal, but it seems like there's been a lot of this. Martin, have you got any sort of knowledge on that?
It is normal. I think most productions, you're going to get big productions as well. You're going to get reshoots for some very sort of prosaic reasons. Every time we look at Marvel MCU sort of text, I always kind of go through the prism of it being so planned, and issue don't seem to sit well with that kind of planned idea. They sort of seem like they might be, but I actually think that maybe there are more reshoots because stuff is bubbling along all the time. You've got several, as Jarian mentions, you've got a lot of projects in parallel. If you think about how much time it took to animate something like the first season of What If, I think I read somewhere that the timeline that people expected that show to have taken in terms of its production was probably from around the time of Infinity War coming out.
Right.
So a lot is bubbling along all the time. And so, I'd be tempted to sort of think that reshoots might be promising, cameos that have only just been grasped that could be done or reveals, reveals of things. I mean, or they could be those very normal prosaic reshoots where, there was some continuity error or the editors didn't have enough, sort of shots and angles to choose from. So I think it's probably a bit of a balance of those. But yeah, I think there's always a chance that it could be something that's, there's big teams even just writing these films and kind of steering them through, and they must all be talking. I can only assume now they're all talking to each other.
Yeah. And of course, Dolph Lundgren and David Hasselhoff weren't available when they originally shot Multiverse of Madness, so they had to squeeze them in this month.
I'm gonna take a wild guess here and say that I think that with Multiverse of Madness, I think the popularity of No Way Home and the multiverse, and the idea that Luke had about throwing the kitchen sink in, I think that kind of resonated there, and I wonder if they're adding more for that multiverse tie-in to have more people, more cameos.
I think if there's ever going to be an opportunity, this is going to be it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's in the title, isn't it? Multiverse of Madness. This whole thing is mad. Let's just see what happens. Let's chuck the kitchen sink at it and see what goes on.
I also think it would be really interesting too, because now that we've seen like Sylvie and Loki, not really like she lost her universe, to see more characters who don't have their universes pop up in the future. You know, that because everything's so intertwined, so it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in the future, especially if they do something like Secret Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. What else we got, Jarian?
That's pretty much it for news. But speaking of Secret Wars, it does seem like that's the plan to tie up the multiverse. And I know the Russos have mentioned interest in doing it. And I know the bumpy road there with Scarlett Johansson's contract issue, but it's fixed. Hopefully they do get the Russo brothers back, and hopefully that we get the huge battle in a Secret Wars movie. Get the Beyonder, hopefully. Just get all kinds of characters, and it's probably going to be their way to reset the MCU. I think I was saying in the group with a theory on that they're going to basically kill off old characters that they don't want to continue with, and then bring in new characters for castings for those characters, but also to refresh the characters from other properties they haven't used yet, or they want to kill off to introduce new actors for those characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think if they went down the Secret Wars route, which we think they will, do you think it would be multiple movies? Do you think they can wrap that up in one movie, or do you think there'll be a 2-parter, maybe even a 3-parter?
It's going to have to be probably a 2-part film, because I could see on the size of Infinity War Endgame, if not larger.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. That'd be interesting.
And it would also be really interesting too if they used somebody like Kang in that, and they had like Kang like as the villain with Rama Tut and like another variant of himself. Like, it's like, how do you make it bigger and badder than Thanos? Oh, you make 3 villains who are, variants of the same one.
Yeah, I could definitely see if they don't bring in Beyonder, that they go with multiples of Kang variants as villains in this film.
Yeah,
like he's the antagonist.
Do you think that they would steer clear of the sort of God Doom idea, and him having, total control, or do you think they would go down that route of having Doom as involved?
I think it depends. I think it depends on how.
Sorry, just to interfere there. Obviously, I was going along the lines that we was going with, talking about the 2015 Secret Wars. Was it 2015?
Yeah, I was a bit confused for a minute there, because I always go to 1984. Always go to 1984. And I was thinking, these guys are making that kind of humble 12-issue series sound much more complicated than it is. But then when you said something, I realised that you were talking.
Or a combination of both.
It could be. They could pull from multiple. I think it depends on what they do with Doom and how the route of the Doom takes. But it'd be interesting to see, God Doom, and maybe that's going to explain for the head of Nowhere.
Or you could even take like, the Doom takes like the Beyonder's power at one point, and basically just he wants the Beyonder's power. You could totally have him in that role where he's like, oh, look, Kang and the TVA, like I want some of that power, like, so maybe he could go after something like that in replacement of the Beyonder's power. Yeah,
and I think that would bring those two stories, those two versions of Secret Wars together quite nicely. I think using Doom, using maybe something to do with the Celestials, potentially using Kang. There's the replacing of the Beyonder, replacing of Molecule Man. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of combining a few characters in those two stories, and using different characters to tell that story as a whole.
This is a slight problem, isn't it, for them going forward? Now they've really established the Celestials, who we already had seen, but they've really established the Celestials' role. But you've also got Kang, who has been sort of mentioned as someone who's a stopgap to make sure reality doesn't kind of fall apart. He's been doing this job, this sort of mission. We're also aware of the multiverse. I do wonder if there'll be a kind of. I'm really enjoying multiversal stuff in the MCU. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and doesn't seem to be kind of weighing viewers down with kind of continuity burdens that they can't handle. I think once everybody, I kind of think in a way, actually Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse kind of played a good role there, because it kind of was a nice snappy kind of thing. Maybe even mentioned this last time, but a nice snappy introduction to the concept. But it's like if you look up for just Marvel Universe comics, you look up any kind of hierarchy of the cosmic beings and the kind of reality altering beings, it's crazy. There's like this huge kind of hierarchy of, there's always somebody I've never heard of when I look at it, and I think of myself as sort of fairly well versed. So I think they're going to be careful not to let it get like that. And if they kind of, I think people will accept this part of the universe, or this timeline is kind of ruled by the Celestials, or kind of at fate is decided by the Celestials. And over in this kind of corner of the multiverse, it's Kang. And you don't always have to explain those things. That's one of the few things I can see being a bit, sort of a jeopardy. That people kind of go, but I thought that he controlled reality, which I can imagine writers tying themselves in complete knots to try and solve all of those. So I hope they kind of credit, I rewatched Eternals in the last few days, and it kind of plays quite well when you just accept that you're not going to be looking out for connections to everything else all the time. Mm-hmm. I think we have to remember that there was a time when there was only 2 MCU movies, Iron Man and Incredible Hulk. And we appreciated that kind of connection at the end. So as long as they remember that, I think viewers will accept that things have different feels, shows have different feels, and they can operate in different rules, different kind of reality rules and things like that. Don't throw that away completely, and don't try and make everything conform. Then I think it'll just continue to be fun, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Go on, Joe. No, go for it.
I agree with you too. I think they might use the multiverse for different things, like maybe the Living Tribunal in one multiverse. We've already seen the Watcher in the What If kind of type universe. Are we going to see that kind of come over? In the main universe, we have Celestials, and we've seen a few Elders. Are they going to expand on that and see more Elders? What other Celestials are we going to see as well? So I do completely agree with you with you about the multiverse, and maybe having the people in different multiverses and not all of them in the same universe.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I like what you said there as well about relieving people of the burden of worrying about continuity. I mean, that is I think there's always that argument, and Jarian likes this one, the canon argument. What's canon? What's not? Look at his face there. Loves it. But and also about that continuity, and an argument that I understand why the argument's there. I really do. But I just kind of go, let it go. Just let it go. Yeah. And what it is how did Steve Rogers get away with doing what he did in Endgame? And I'm just like, just let it go. Don't worry about it. I love the fact that people theorize about it. I do. I think that's great. And that's what's interesting, and just digressing ever so slightly. So I think, Jarian, you're a bit of a football or a soccer fan, aren't you? Yeah. So obviously over here now in the UK, they've just brought in VAR over the last couple of seasons, so video assistant referees, and it basically just takes out actually it doesn't. It puts in a lot more doubt, but in many instances, it actually takes out all kind of doubt at all. Like it analyzes it, like right, finally, and then you've almost got nothing to complain about after that. Don't get me wrong, there is plenty to complain about with VAR still, but if it's offside, it's offside. Like if they call it offside and they go VAR's told it's offside, it is. And it's so now relating that back to the MCU, it's almost like, look, just don't worry about it. Stop trying to find a definitive answer. Like what Martin said, just enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think people are showing the signs I think audiences are showing the signs they can. And when you get a nice crisp explanation of something like it was in into the Spider-Verse, people can sort of take that away and kind of go, oh right, so I see I have a concept of canon, which by the way I'm a big person for canon as well. It really bothers me sort of stuff about canon, and I take it very seriously. But somebody explains to you it's canon for them if they experience it in that kind of reality. It's perfectly acceptable, and I think maybe we'll get on to talk about this later when talking about the recent TV shows. But they've all got such different feels as well. Like nobody would sort of say if you're going to think about the Celestials all the time and the Living Tribunal, would you want the kind of, I'm not going to say ultra realistic because I'm a film studies lecturer, and that would sound like I was saying something like kind of that's not really true of something like, you know, Hawkeye, but Hawkeye or the Netflix shows. Would you want to lose that kind of realist feel, that sort of relatively realist feel? And you know, but maybe that can come back later. But yeah, I think audiences, you know, don't always get enough credit.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it started off as news, but that's what we always do. Every week we do that. But we've wrapped up news there, though, Jarian. Yeah, because then we can start probing into Martin's mind a little bit more. Yeah.
Yep, all good there with news. So hopefully we'll find out a date tonight with that trailer. But yeah, stay tuned because it seems like lately the wheels are in motion. So.
Lovely, yeah, and as we said a couple of weeks ago, they've got to announce something soon, because we're all sitting there going, well, hold on, the next thing that's happening is Multiverse of Madness in May, so give us something, come on.
One last thing real quick too. So
go for it.
By now, Disney gives all of the news people their like 22 slate of things, or their yearly slate of things, and so far what I've seen from all the regulars I follow for new stuff and info, and they keep mentioning that the 2022 new slate, they haven't gotten it yet. So I wonder what tonight's trailer, maybe Marvel will give it to them. Maybe they're still shuffling on dates. I know some have said that Marvel does not want us to be too firm on announcing dates right now, because in case things get moved around, they don't want to have to go through that whole juggling and that kind of thing. So they're being more fluid with that. So that can also be why, too, they haven't had their full year slate yet. But that Japanese Marvel site did, you know, kind of the things we know, but no dates, but what's coming this year.
Cool. Excellent. Well, you know, so we've got you back on, Martin, to probe your mind and just to see what your thoughts have been. We spoke to you, it's got to be 4 months ago now, 5 months ago, sort of middle to end of last year, and a lot's happened since then. We've had lots of shows. We've had, you know, a couple of movies. We've had a couple more shows, and big things happening, like in No Way Home and The Eternals. These huge events and huge people coming in and entities, and then and for want of better words, all the way down, and similar to what you were saying, back down to these kind of realistic, gritty Hawkeye world, introducing characters that we recognise from other shows that we thought weren't canon and maybe are, and who are these people? So what, you know, just generally speaking, how have you felt about what's happened in the MCU over the last sort of 6 months or so?
I think I spoke to you, I can't remember if Shang-Chi had already been out, but I spoke to you around the time that was out, and
That's right.
I'm not sure that we discussed it, which is making me think that, you know, either I hadn't seen it or it was embargoed a bit for spoilers or something like that. But I think it's been a good few months. I mean, it's kind of astonishing now that you get so used to this kind of constant rolling production line that you find yourself, you know, Andy said before, you know, like, No Way Home's gone now, so we're sort of saying, what's next? And it's like, you know, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, if there was a hint of Spider-Man media version, you know, you'd probably read a headline about that, and then 10 years later it would materialize and would be rubbish anyway. So, I mean, we're incredibly spoilt now. You know, like, to go from show to show. I mean, just, you know, take the films out of last year. I was thinking about this myself. You know, the four live action series and then the What If series. Just incredible. And then when Jarian said, you know, maybe 6 series for the next year, I mean, if they all have 6 episodes, that's nearly an episode a week. You know, it's like 36 episodes across a year, and maybe some will have 7 or 8 episodes. So I mean, it's we are incredibly spoiled. While the standard is still pretty good, I think we're very spoiled. Obviously, that could change if the standard slipped. So I enjoyed Shang-Chi. I think it you know, it felt like it had less reverberations for the kind of the already in play characters and the already in play universe, but then it promised kind of more stuff. And I think I took it as a fun kind of adventure piece with some good new characters, some welcome, very, very minor characters coming back, like Trevor. You know, it sort of it was a nice palate cleanser, really, after the kind of chaos of the first few TV shows, you know, like, in a good way, the kind of the sort of the big moments. And it's funny. Like I can tell from I turned off. I think I told Andy that I knew I wasn't going to see Spider-Man No Way Home until January at best because of circumstances, and so I turned everything down. I turned every Facebook group off. Like no comic stuff, no your group, no anything that could have spoiled anything. I pretty much got away with it as well. Although I was sat in a pub the day before I did get to see Spider-Man No Way Home, and some fairly major spoilers came from one table away. But because of that, I've kind of noticed, and I've turned everything on again. I've kind of noticed that a lot of people have only just come to Eternals since its debut on Disney Plus. So that's something I'd be happy to talk about. It's very kind of fresh in my mind, and I've been kind of clocking what the reception of that has been like. A lot of the groups I'm in are kind of comic groups, not just sort of comic book movie groups, and there's been a lot of talk on the Jack Kirby groups and things like that. Very interesting, But I think it's been a good few months. I mean, there's been a bit of everything, hasn't there? I mean, it's kind of hard to believe that it's a year since we were watching WandaVision and kind of marveling at that first Strange episode and kind of thinking, is it just going to be this TV show within a show for the whole thing? How's that going to work? And I suppose one of the themes they did introduce there was the kind of cracking reality, wasn't it? Like we've seen a lot of this year. When you get that first, the camera pulls back and somebody's observing them. It turns out to be sort of that sort of version of Sword. And No Way Home was great. I really enjoyed it. I think we just, sometimes you just have to take stock of what you're actually seeing and not just want to look for the next thing.
Absolutely.
It's really exciting to know that Multiverse of Madness is coming, and I'm very excited about Sam Raimi's involvement in that as well, by the way. I mean, I think that's such a kind of good move for every party concerned, But there was so much amazing stuff in No Way Home that if you don't sort of sit and sort of wallow in it for a bit, you kind of again, there would have been a time when nobody would have thought that Marvel Studios could make a Spider-Man film. Never mind, kind of integrate all these different versions of Spider-Man, integrate characters from the rest of the MCU, and kind of reference characters that are now beloved from animated, an animated version, like referencing Miles. So it's but yeah, there's lots of great promise for the future, isn't there? And I particularly enjoyed the way that the Disney Plus shows have sort of felt like their own thing. And I don't mean in a kind of continuity sense and in a multiverse sense. I mean, each one has had a distinct feel. And I think they've really given the head to those directors on those series and kind of gone, this is your, you create your own feel, you're in charge of this. And I think all the shows have been pretty fantastic. I think I mentioned back in September that, Loki, I'd worried about Loki a little bit at one point, and then it kind of turned it around. Well, I rewatched Loki after we did that episode, and I think Loki is just absolutely superb. So, it's great to see that kind of experiment, I suppose, on Disney Plus promise so much now. I think I'd be willing to stick my neck out and say I think we might get some of the best stuff on Disney Plus in the next 2 years.
I agree with you. I do agree. I think we all feel the same, actually, to be totally honest. And we'll come on to talking about Disney Plus and weekly shows compared to feature films in a moment, because it's something I want to probe away at you for. But you mentioned the themes about the shows and things like that. And one of our group members, Tim, he popped a post on. Oh, I've lost it now. That's typical. We popped a post on our page the other week, and it was about if you could use one word to describe this phase so far, what would it be? There was a few words that come up. Ambitious transition from Jarian. We had what else did we have? Building by Lawrence. We had expansion by our very own RMC. Pain by Mark Relaford, who's been on the show before as well. My thing, me and Alex were discussing it a little while ago, and I think that identity has played a huge part in this phase so far. The identity of the characters themselves, of who they think they are, who other people think they are, and who we perceive them to be. And I seem to have seen this theme. There obviously has been, each show has had its feel, as you quite rightly put, but I think each show has had that kind of So WandaVision. Who is Wanda without Vision?
Hmm.
You know, who is Wanda now that she's out on her own? Who is Loki? You know, we thought we knew who Loki was, and then he's gone on this alternative mission,
Yeah.
and he's this different person. He's now gone. You know, we thought this was Loki, but actually now this is Loki. You know, Falcon and Winter Soldier, both Sam and Bucky had identity issues. They were all based around Steve. So who are each of those people? Can they be their own person? Can Sam be Captain America, you know, when Captain America already existed? Can Bucky be somebody without Captain America? Who is he? And it goes on. We can carry on going on like this.
Even John Walker had identity issues too, you know? Like, he just thought he was Captain America, you know? Like,
and we'll see Rhodey too when, you know, Armor Wars comes out without Tony, you know, so he'll go through that same thing also.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess all of those words that people were using, you know, building and pain and all of these things, they're all true. But I think this overarching feeling, for me in particular, was this question of identity. And I don't know if you'd noticed that or if you'd felt the same. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's very insightful. I mean, I think just as you were talking about that, then it made me think of, again, I can't help but kind of go back to being a kid and reading some of these comics or having these 70s comics in my hands. And like, if somebody had told you then that Loki would be the guy who wanted to save the timeline and Icarus would be the guy that wanted to kill the rest of the Eternals. But, you know, it's all been explained so well in kind of good writing that you kind of accept it. And by the way, I liked what they did with Icarus in the film. But yeah, I think, you know, I've written about superheroes and kind of identity. It's a bit of a staple. So I mean, in its most basic sense, it's a bit of a staple of superheroes in the sense that, you know, people are choosing to be maybe better than they were, or they're kind of choosing a you know, an identity to sort of do superhero stuff into fighting, or they're you know, it's that kind of, probably the most basic trope is the kind of Oedipal identity thing. You know, the Spider-Man's lost Uncle Ben. So, you know, who is he going to be? You know, remember the last line of the first Raimi film is "I am Spider-Man," and the last line of Iron Man is "I am Iron Man." So, you know, you've got this kind of level on which it's kind of always stated in these films that there's that kind of part of the superhero that's struggling for identity, and it's often, you know, the kind of Oedipal finding the heroic stuff within that helps you sort of beat the villain. I do agree, though, that since we've gone into this kind of phase, it's a pretty good watchword for this phase. You know, variant might be another kind of good watchword, you know, but that just comes back to identity anyway. So I think you're right. I wonder if one of the reasons is the kind of the world moving on, and we've got a lot of, you know, there's a kind of a whole bunch of legacy heroes and kind of new mantle heroes now for very good reasons, very good real world reasons. Some comic fans don't like that, as we know. Some comic fans have fully embraced it. I think MCU watchers and kind of TV and film fans have in the main embraced that stuff. So that means that we have a situation where maybe Captain America shouldn't be Steve anymore, or just not Steve for a while. And we have a situation where, you know, maybe John Walker can, you know, what a great minor character, by the way, from last year. You know, a character who we've hardly seen, who you can still sort of think about a lot and kind of imagine doing some great things. So, you know, maybe John Walker can become a hero. And, you know, Captain Marvel not being a man as she was when I was growing up and so on, things like that. So I think there's been a certain kind of revolving of kind of people that become superheroes, and I think that's very right and fitting. And so I think that's kind of led to one kind of layer of the identity stuff. And I think maybe some of it is just to do with, you know, Marvel has started to entrust some of these properties to directors who have already proven that they can do mature, interesting filmmaking. And, you know, again, thinking of Eternals, there were a lot of moments in that where they really tried to explore, you know, for better or for worse, I know not everybody loves that film, but they really tried to explore, you know, families can be torn apart, and then people can go with the person who appears to be doing bad rather than stay with the ones who are doing good, depending on your perspective. And some people can see the overall mission as worth it, even if they end up going against their family or their members of their team and so on. And yeah, I think there's some sort of mature working through some of these things now, and you know, enough time has been spent on some of these characters, not all of them, but some of these characters have got enough time behind them that you can kind of go, well, okay, I've seen a lot of Loki's had a lot of screen time. I can buy that he would go through this transformation, and maybe that one person would have such an impact on him. And it's maybe a bit harder to see that with Icarus and the Eternals because he's new to people. So I would sort of explain to people who don't know the Eternals and Icarus is kind of changed. And I would just sort of say, just imagine Superman had this kind of existential, problem, and what would he do? So to all intents and purposes, he is that kind of character. But I think it's a really insightful comment, and I think they're trying to take it to a level past where it's just that kind of basic superhero makes choices, sort of superhero decides to be, superhero potential person decides to be superhero for good or bad. We're seeing a lot of shades of grey now, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure. Do you you talked about perception there, and one of my favourite shows at the moment, and I haven't actually seen all the latest episode, is Cobra Kai. I don't know have you seen it?
I haven't, no, but I know the premise.
Right, okay, so I won't beat around the bush too much, but obviously, so you got the premise is Johnny, who's our quote-unquote hero in Cobra Kai. He was the bully in Karate Kid. There is a fantastic episode, it's in season 2 or 3, I can't remember, but he's telling the story of what happened in the first Karate Kid to somebody, and he's going, oh yeah, so I went down onto the beach to see my girlfriend, and there's this new guy like hitting on my girlfriend, and then he breaks my radio, and then he tries to sucker punch me, and then when I was sitting there, going to the toilet, and someone, he sprayed me with water, and then he got his karate master to beat me up, and then he beat me with an illegal kick in the tournament, and you're like, actually, yeah, that all did happen. And then obviously Daniel then says about the whole story from his perspective, and he's the hero in his own story, isn't he? And Johnny's the hero in his story. And that's one of my favourite elements of that show, the fact that everybody thinks that they're doing the right thing. And if you see the latest season, I'm only about 4 or 5 episodes in, but there's this great sort of just twisting back and forward, like he's good and he's bad, but he's with the bad people, but he's doing it for the good reasons, and he's totally got his mind. It's brilliant. Absolutely love this kind of idea of good versus bad, and this is the Loki thing, isn't it? Is he good? Is he bad? Is he a bit of both? I really like that.
The greatest saga so far has been Thanos, the Thanos saga, and really, if you take it as an overall thing, and I mean, there were lots of moments where you could see Thanos's, not humanity, that would be the wrong word, but you could see that there was an understandability of him.
Barbara will love hearing that.
Yeah, far from a two-dimensional character by the end, and you didn't want him to win, but you could see that there was a cost to him not, to him being killed and so on. So I mean, that's a kind of a great testament again. But again, I come back to sort of praising the audience. I think if people weren't subscribing to Disney Plus and kind of supporting these shows, if they weren't going to the box office, I know that Eternals was a smaller than we've become used to for the actual Marvel movies, but that Marvel would not kind of, there might be a kind of rethink. It might be like, well, maybe people want, and I think the multiverse is big enough that if we want a few simple superhero daring do type tales, then kind of that can kind of be provided without all the complexity. But I actually think that even with the youngest hero in the universe in Spider-Man, they can kind of, one of the things I noticed about No Way Home was how subtly they kind of have pushed the aging to the background, but yet it still happens. So, you had a lot of explanation of the blip and the years it's taken from people in that kind of high school group. And then at the end of, and he's only properly sorted out his relationship at the end of the second film. And then at the end of the third film, he's arrived in, what I take to be Manhattan, in his own place. And, he's sort of going to go to the next phase. They've gone to university and so on. And I thought that was a really well done kind of little background thing in that film, because again, I've written before about Spider-Man and the kind of the fact the character always has to be, you know, Marvel sort of sliding time, whatever you want to call it in the comics, where Spider-Man's been growing up into what, maybe about 37 now or something over the last
for about
years.
70 years.
You know, necessitating solutions like Miles coming along and things like that. Always has to happen with the character, because you can't have him fight these aging problems without ever passing gates, you know, passing through gates and kind of getting a little bit older. And I thought that they've acknowledged that, you know, well with Spider-Man No Way Home. And I think audiences can appreciate that. You know, I don't think they kind of just want, you know, if they want a fun film where it's more full of adventure, you know, we already mentioned Shang-Chi, and you know, I didn't have many complaints on that kind of level with that film. So yeah, I think yeah, it's there's a lot to kind of get hold of, and there's a lot going out there. It still amazes me that there's any kind of coherence to this, to all this production going on, really.
It's incredible, isn't it, when you think there's so much going on? So we sort of touched upon it a couple of times there. This, and even you just said yourself, which I think I agree with, and I saw both Jarian and Alex both nodded along with. Do we think that the way forward to tell these stories, or not, maybe not necessarily the way forward, but the better way to do it is to do it in this weekly fashion with shorter bursts than a feature-length movie? What are the pros and cons of having the weekly episodes compared to a 2 or 3 hour, you know, feature-length movie? And then as a sort of part B to that question, looking at the Disney Plus, the streaming method, is it I mean, I know it's horses for courses, you know, each to their own and all of that, but is it a release every episode and binge watch, or is it no, actually week by week, let's see this progress over the course of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, however many weeks? So first part of the question is film versus shorter, you know, series, and then series binge watching or weekly episodes.
I mean, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, that astonishing kind of promo that came out, was it about October? I know it was tied in with an anniversary that had all the first real looks at Miss Marvel and Moon Knight and everything, the kind of one that went out on Disney Plus, the sort of 10-minute thing. It's, you know, the sort of the differentiation between how the theatrical films are being sort of privileged and the TV shows is not like it was when, for instance, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came around, and it was quite clear that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. you had a kind of, you know, which really had its moments. I enjoyed it. You know, I watched it till the end. You know, I was pleased when the last season came on Disney Plus. It meant we could finally watch the last season here, because it had been Andy will probably remember, it had been a little bit sort of kicked around the TV schedules in the UK. But it was very much a kind of here is a sort of pallid televisual attempt to replicate some of the stuff you're seeing in, you know, cinemas at a time when we still only got, you know, one Marvel movie every year, maybe 2. We've kind of gone way beyond that now, and I think the way Marvel Studios as an entity, as an identity of its own, is kind of holding the focus on the movies and the Disney Plus shows is kind of getting more and more equal. So I think there's a real sign that they're kind of, you know, the plans that are in motion are there. They're sort of equal for both of those things. Now, whether or not that makes kind of business sense, I definitely am not privy enough to Disney's kind of numbers to know. But I mean, if you try and find out about things like HBO Max subscriptions, to try and look at it from the other side of the kind of superhero coin, you know, given what happened to the second Wonder Woman film, I think HBO must have been happy enough with the amount of new subscribers or resubscribers it signed up with the Wonder Woman film to kind of do the same technique with, you know, Suicide Squad, and then the same technique with Matrix and so on. So I think there's probably enough people kind of putting dollars into subscriptions for HBO Max to justify, you know, taking some prize jewels of Warner Brothers' last year of movies and kind of allowing them to kind of crawl into theaters, really. with some very low returns, particularly for the Matrix. So we can only assume that kind of side of the economic formula is working for HBO Max. So I think it's probably working for Disney too.
From what
Which
I've seen in
means
the
that-
numbers, it does. There's like 100. They've got
Yeah.
120 million subscriptions at $7 each, which works out as $600 million a month.
Exactly, and that's plenty of budget to pay for, and I think we might see that kind of production value type aspect to this kind of equalize as well in the shows. So if you think about, I mentioned Agents of Shield, when they wanted to do somebody who was really super on Agents of Shield, who could fly, for instance, like Graviton. Was it Graviton? The guy that Adrian Pasdar became. You got maybe 90 seconds of them in special effects. And that was a show with a decent budget that looked quite good and sort of had a good look to it. And we've gone way beyond that with the kind of production value standard of particularly WandaVision and Loki. So I think that that success of the sort of Disney Plus model is going to start feeding through. In terms of watching them, I've done both this year. I watched all of them weekly until it came time to not watch Hawkeye for reasons that we wanted to save it for Christmas, and then I binge watched Hawkeye, and actually it worked great. Binge watching Hawkeye. But I think it's nice to have that new episode every week. I mean, it's a nice, exciting feeling, and it's weird, isn't it? Because it's kind of reintroducing, and given that WandaVision was in many ways this love letter to old television for the first few episodes, it was this, this real, wasn't old television great? Isn't it worthy of having nostalgia about? It's really interesting that the weekly watching thing is such an old television, kind of tactic. I'm going through the same, the same as probably everybody else with Boba Fett right now, and I've kind of become used to it. I've even not missed the fact that you don't seem to get 2 episodes when things kick off anymore. So I've got only getting 1 episode. It's never going to make Disney Plus feel like a TV channel, because that's like a totally different format, isn't it? It's something, in our idea, Andy and I's idea of a TV station will probably be different from your guys' idea. But it does sort of make sense as a way to have those stories feel like they're kind of spooling out over time. There's a very, with the MCU, the building aspect that one of your group members mentioned, there's this sort of feeling there's always something going on. So I think you can, it sort of feels like you can handle that weight. Also reminds me more of comics,
Yeah.
It reminds me more of comics where it means a lot of cliffhangers, but you sort of know that there's more around the corner and that the eventual resolution is going to be worth it. And actually mentioning Secret Wars, there weren't that many things between Secret Wars and Crisis on Infinite Earths. There were a few, but there weren't that many that were like defined, this is going to be told in 12 issues. You normally didn't know how many issues things were going to be told in until they actually ended and you had the last issue in your hands. But yeah, I think is it the way forward? I think Marvel's putting a lot of energy into it, really a lot of energy, and the fact that we seem to be seeing Captain America bounce from a Disney Plus show back into a theatrical makes me think that they are starting to not pay so much attention to the sort of venue in which the story is told. So you establish Sam as Captain America in a Disney Plus show, and then there's Captain America 4, and Sam is Captain America, we presume, for at least a large part of that. And one more point on the Eternals. I think the Eternals has not had the box office that I think maybe a lot of people expect from Marvel movies. There's that very confident Eternals will return caption at the end of the film, which means that Feige liked Chloe Zhao's work on Eternals, I think. And I fully believe that the Eternals will return, but there's no need for them to return in a Eternals 2, is there?
No.
There's more than enough stuff going on that's going to be cosmic, into which they could play, into which they could easily play. And if there is if there needs to be an Eternals Disney Plus series, or Eternals focused Disney Plus series down the way, maybe people will like that more than another movie.
I think you said that, didn't you, Jarian, about them coming into a series? Somebody said that. I'm sure I heard somebody say that they could bring Eternals into a series.
I don't think I said that, but I'd like to see it. If they don't do a movie, I definitely want them to have a series on it, because they definitely left it open to where there's more story to tell, and the whole conversation in the group about Ereshkigal and what he was doing, kept him in the dark. What's true, what's not true. Where does this lead to? Where did he take them? The whole thing with Star Fox and Star Fox coming in with Pip. It's kind of like, where's this going? And did what Ereshkigal tell Cersei about them being the memory store and that kind of stuff, was a bullshit, or is there something else out there? So I want to see more Eternals. I want to know what the rest of this leads to.
Yeah, me too. I think if you did it as a show, it'd also be easier. It's a pretty unwieldy group, and I can't help but think maybe that's why 2 characters got killed in the movie, because they suddenly went down from 10 or so, maybe 9 or 10 core cast members to 8 or 7, sort of 8. But if you did it as a show, it's much easier to have 2 or 3 of them go off at a time and deal with one thing. And I think that could work. That's how Avengers comics work. It's actually like, it's only really in the sort of 2000s that it became every issue was a kind of Brian Bendis style, humdinger of a battle in the middle of Times Square where all the Avengers are fighting at once. Generally what it was like Wonder Man and Beast would go off and have some kind of funny little quirky adventure, and then at the end of the issue they'd come back and they'd all hang out in the mansion together. So I think that kind of, again, there's quite a comicness about that, but I think it could work really well. And I think at the cost that Eternals presumably was, with the amount of money that's come back, I can't help but think they might be nervous about trying to relaunch that as another theatrical feature. But you now have those characters. You have the Celestials. You have, as Jarian says, you have Pip and Eros, and these people could all weave in and out of various things. You now don't have to have all the Eternals be present at any one time. Mm-hmm. They've kind of officially separated, haven't they? So
I can almost see it like a. Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, and you've still got, Star-Lord was part Celestial, so like you can always bring him back and somehow weave him into that whole mix and the Guardians of the Galaxy at some point, if you really ever wanted to,
Yeah. And I think they're going to have some feelings about the fact that Thanos' brother is showing up, by the way, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Real quick though, I'll say I can almost see it to where if they do a Eternal sequel, that they can mix in with a Guardians or an Avengers to kind of help draw those people in. And it's definitely going to have to be some kind of crossover film if they do a sequel to Eternals.
Yeah, like you say, to draw the people in that weren't watching it in the first place. Yeah, that's a good shout. That is a good shout. Excellent. Well, I think that there's lots of pros and cons, isn't there, to a movie. I mean, I really like the act of going to the theatre, going to the cinema. I really like the whole process of it. Going there and getting your popcorn and sitting watching the trailers and had that shared experience with other people. And I think there's a different feel to watching something at a cinema compared to watching it in your front room, because you watch it in the front room and you can pause it, you can pick up your phone, you can say, oh, somebody's knocked at the door, or when you're in the theatre, that is it. All that matters is what's in front of you. That's it. I mean, and even if it's a 3-hour movie, you will die before you have to go to the toilet. Where at home it's slightly different feel. So I think there is still a place for theatre for sure. But hopefully we'll be getting more and more elaborate stories on Disney Plus. With these budgets, like we said, those numbers that we were talking about. I mean, it was 120 odd million subscribers and $660 million a month. I mean, that's just a horrific amount of money. Absolutely horrific amount of money. So hopefully they can keep producing these things for a while. But
one thing real quick too about movies, there's no way that you could install No Way Home on Disney Plus to come out or on some other streaming platform. All the reactions when you saw No Way Home with what they revealed and everything like that. So there was no way that could have been a streaming option along with the actual release.
No, that's
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, it's really unique, No Way Home, isn't it? I think we can all agree no one's really done that before to that level, and so there was never a chance. I mean, Marvel hasn't really debuted anything on Disney Plus that's a movie other than the sort of the did Black Widow come out? Someone
Yeah,
said-
Black Widow.
Yeah.
So there's only Black Widow, which had already been quite compromised, hadn't it, by being sort of a year late, and it was a real victim of the pandemic sort of thing. You could never have done that with No Way Home. And there's something specific to that, and specific as Jarian says, to the kind of the amount of surprises in it, to the reaction they were anticipating, which took it far from being just Spider-Man movie 3 of this latest wave of Spider-Man movies, in a way that Wonder Woman 2, and I'm not doing this to knock DC, although people do think that I knock DC all the time, but Wonder Woman 2 could never kind of quite, so I can see why that was a different proposition. I think the guy from Warner Brothers, one of the top executives at Warner Brothers, said something like, our library is, our movies are incredibly valuable, but they're not valuable if they're sitting on a shelf and nobody's watching them. And I think that was, they used that line when they were kind of announcing, Matrix and Dune and all these things going to kind of come out as half streaming things. I think the way that Disney and Marvel has done it has been like, the shows that are going on are almost like the weekly dose of Marvel. They're like the comic. They're in Britain, we used to have a kind of a anthology comic called Mighty World of Marvel that came out every week that would have these chopped up, 6 or 10 page dollops of the American comics. So they're kind of like that showcase thing. But then the movies absolutely have their place. And for all the reasons you sort of say as well, Andy, as an experience, I'd never ever advocate losing movies. Just purely thinking on a narrative level, I think some of the characteristics of something like Eternals would work well in a series. But I mean, again,
sure.
I feel very spoilt that we can be talking about having both.
we are certainly spoiled, aren't we? Certainly spoiled. Brilliant. So let's wrap this up then, fellas. So fantastic, Martin. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you back on.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Just great, insightful knowledge from somebody who is clearly passionate about the medium itself and about the history, and B, just again, just full of knowledge and ideas and thoughts, and I love the way you think. I love the way that everything's a possibility with you. So it's great to have
well,
you
I mean, in a nice way, I feel more of a fan when I come on this, because my students know how much I love Marvel, so there's no hiding it. But I can't be quite as positive about Marvel all the time there as I am here.
No, that's it. Here you can just fanboy out.
It's nice to have this as an outlet. So thanks for asking me back.
No problem, mate. No problem. Jarian, Alex, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for coming on as always. And we'll catch everybody next week. So thanks very much for listening. See you again.
Bye.